the clash of steel echoing through the misty valleys of ancient Britain, where a lone warrior king stands defiant against the encroaching shadows of an empire crumbling. King Arthur, sword in hand, rallying his knights against waves of invaders, his blade Excalibur gleaming like a beacon in the night. But what if this isn't just a fairy tale spun from the threads of legend? What if Arthur was the hidden symbol of a desperate Celtic resistance, a real figure masked in myth to conceal a grand conspiracy against the Roman overlords who sought to erase the old ways? Secret gatherings in fog-shrouded forests, druid whispers plotting rebellion, and Arthur as the codename for a network of warlords fighting to preserve their Celtic heritage. Some even draw parallels to modern tales, like how John F. Kennedy's Camelot became a metaphor for an idealized era cut short by shadowy forces. Hold on to that thought, because tonight we're diving deep into the enigmas of Dark Ages Britain, a time shrouded in more questions than answers. What if the so-called Dark Ages weren't a plunge into chaos after the Romans pulled out in 407, but a vibrant era of hidden resilience, where ancient secrets bubbled just beneath the surface? Was King Arthur real, or was he crafted as a symbol to rally the Celts against Roman domination? Historians have debated this for centuries, but let's peel back the layers. The Romans marched into Britain in 43 AD, not as outright conquerors in every tale, but sometimes invited by local kings like Verica, who saw alliance as a path to power. Yet, whispers of conspiracy suggest it was all a setup, a way for the empire to infiltrate and dismantle Celtic strongholds from within. Imagine tribal leaders, descendants of the ancient Britons, plotting in the shadows of hill forts like Cadbury Castle, where archaeological digs have unearthed evidence of brutal massacres followed by swift rebuilds. Those ramparts, standing 5 meters high, weren't just defenses, they were symbols of defiance. But after the slaughter, the fields were torched, a message etched in fire: don't mess with Rome. Or was it? Some theorists posit that these events were exaggerated in later chronicles to justify the erasure of Celtic culture, much like how modern narratives sometimes twist facts to fit agendas. Enter the enigma of the Green Children of Woolpit, a tale that feels ripped from a fever dream and ties right into this era's mysteries. In the 1200s, during the reign of King Stephen, villagers in Suffolk stumbled upon 2 siblings emerging from wolf pits' traps for beasts. But these kids were no ordinary find. Their skin shimmered an eerie green. They babbled in a tongue no one recognized, and they refused all food except raw beans. The boy soon sickened and died, but the girl adapted, her skin fading to normal as she learned English. She claimed they hailed from a twilight land called St. Martin's, where the sun never fully rose, and they'd wandered through a cave after hearing bells. Was this a portal to another world, a glimpse of the fairy realms Celtic lore speaks of? Or, as some conspiracy buffs suggest, were they refugees from a hidden Celtic enclave, survivors of Roman purges, their green hue a mark of some ancient ritual or poison? Think about it. Arsenic, used in dyes or as a weapon back then, could cause such discoloration, linking to theories of deliberate poisoning to eliminate threats. Experts lean toward hyperchromic anemia, or chlorosis, a condition from malnutrition that turns skin greenish due to low iron, perhaps from a diet in isolated communities or even from fleeing famine. But that doesn't explain the strange language or the bells. Could those be echoes of church summons, pulling them from a subterranean hideout where Celts evaded Roman taxes? When the legions departed around 410, history books paint a picture of lights going out, cities abandoned, fields overgrown, barbarians at the gates. But what if that's the real conspiracy? A narrative pushed by later chroniclers like the Venerable Bede to glorify the Anglo-Saxon arrival as saviours, while burying the thriving Celtic underbelly. Archaeological evidence tells a different tale. At sites like the Witham Valley, we've found causeways lined with weapons tossed into waters, a ritual spanning millennia, from prehistoric spears to medieval swords. These weren't accidents. They were offerings to water spirits, a Celtic tradition that survived Roman rule and even seeped into Christian practices. Monasteries sprouted along these paths, perhaps to co-opt the old faiths, hiding pagan rites under monastic robes. Theorists whisper of a great conspiracy where church leaders knowingly preserved these secrets, much like in Guy Ritchie's take on King Arthur in his 2017 film, Legend of the Sword. There, Arthur's story unfolds in a gritty, conspiracy-laden world of political intrigue, giant beasts, and shadowy mages echoing real debates about whether Arthur was a composite hero, pieced from Celtic warlords like those at Tintagel, to inspire resistance. And that Kennedy parallel? It's fascinating. Just as JFK's administration was dubbed Camelot, a shining ideal of progress, cut short by assassination conspiracies, Arthur's legend might symbolize a lost golden age of Celtic unity, shattered by Roman and later Saxon plots. Some fringe theories even link it to broader ideas, like the phantom time hypothesis, claiming 300 years of history were fabricated to align calendars and erase uncomfortable truths about Celtic power. But let's ground this in science. DNA studies show Britain's population didn't drastically change post-Rome. It was a blend, with Celtic roots persisting. Pollen analysis from lakes near Hadrian's Wall reveals farmland stayed active, not reverting to wild woods, as the dark narrative claims. Now, imagine if those green children were scouts from a hidden realm, their arrival a sign that the old Celtic world never truly vanished. What other portals might lurk in Britain's landscapes? As we explore, we'll challenge the idea that 410 marked the end, revealing instead a time of creativity where trade routes buzzed with Byzantine merchants, monastic scholars penned Latin verses that shaped European thought, and local leaders like Arthur's prototypes forged independent futures. But the biggest question lingers. If the Dark Ages weren't dark, who benefits from keeping them that way? Let's circle back to Arthur's core mystery. In Welsh chronicles, he's Artorius, a Latinized name hinting at Roman-Celtic fusion, perhaps a byname for real figures like Ambrosius Aurelianus, who led defenses against Saxons. Conspiracy theorists argue this Anglicization was deliberate, a plot by Norman conquerors after 1066 to claim Arthur as English, erasing his role as Celtic defender. It's like how some say the Holy Grail quests were coded messages for lost Celtic knowledge, hidden from church inquisitors. Ritchie's film amps this up with elements of a great conspiracy, where Arthur battles a tyrannical uncle in a world of magic and betrayal, paralleling real historical debates about whether Arthur's battles, listed in the Historia Brittonum, were exaggerated to boost morale against invaders. King Arthur, mortally wounded on the battlefield of Camlan, his loyal knight Bedivere at his side, clutching the legendary sword Excalibur. With his dying breath, Arthur commands Bedivere to cast the blade into the misty waters of a nearby lake. Bedivere hesitates twice, hiding the sword, but on the third try, he hurls it forth. And then, the impossible happens. A slender arm clad in white samite rises from the depths, catches the sword by the hilt, brandishes it thrice, and draws it under. The Lady of the Lake claims her prize, vanishing into the abyss. But what if this isn't mere myth? What if Excalibur's tale hides a profound ancient secret, a ritual of water and metal that stretches back thousands of years, binding the Celts to their gods, in ways that defied Roman conquest, and even Christian conversion? Could this be the key to unlocking why Britain's so-called Dark Ages weren't dark at all, but a time when forbidden practices bubbled up from hidden springs, challenging everything we thought we knew, starting with the Witham Valley in Lincolnshire, a stretch of fenland that feels like it's straight out of a forgotten dream? Back in 1981, archaeologists unearthed something extraordinary here, a series of upright posts and horizontal timbers forming a raised causeway built over 2,000 years ago. But it wasn't just the structure that stunned them, it was what lay beside it. Dozens of ancient weapons, from swords to spears, scattered like offerings from another world. And this wasn't a one-off find. For centuries, dredgers and locals had been pulling similar artifacts from the muck. Sir Joseph Banks, the famed explorer and scientist, even put out a notice in the late 1700s. Find anything unusual, bring it to me, and I'll make it worth your while. Thanks to him, museums now hold hundreds of these items, dating from prehistoric times right up to the 14th century. These weren't battlefield losses or careless drops. No, they were deliberate acts, rituals where precious metal was given back to the water, perhaps to appease spirits or seal pacts with the divine. Imagine standing on one of those ancient causeways, the fen sprawling around you like a living entity, weaving islands and marshes into a labyrinth. Local folks navigated on wooden tracks, and at key crossing points, they'd hurl their blades into the depths. Why? Some say it was a way to return power to the source, the water as a gateway to the underworld. Swords, after all, weren't just tools of war. They symbolized authority, passed from lords to vassals and back. For a king without an earthly superior, like Arthur, the Lady of the Lake becomes that guardian, a watery deity reclaiming what's hers. This ties straight into Excalibur's lore. In the stories, Arthur receives the sword from the lady, and at his end, it's returned to her realm. But peel away the medieval romance, and you see echoes of Celtic traditions. Prehistorians like me get chills recognizing these patterns. Bronze swords pulled from stone molds, mirroring Arthur yanking his blade from the anvil, and weapons consigned to lakes or rivers, just like Excalibur's fate. How did these ancient rites survive the Roman boot and the spread of Christianity? That's where the conspiracy creeps in. Some theorists whisper that the church didn't stamp out these pagan ways. They absorbed them, building abbeys right on those causeways to mask the old beliefs under a Christian veneer. Monks chanting psalms while secretly honoring water spirits, a grand cover-up to convert without fully erasing the past. Pope Gregory himself advised not to destroy pagan temples, but to repurpose them, sprinkling holy water on what was once unholy. And speaking of unholy waters, let's turn to Bath, that elegant Roman spa town built on a site sacred for millennia. Here, 250,000 gallons of hot water gush from the earth daily, at over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The Romans engineered a marvel, containing the spring and erecting temples, but they didn't ignore the native vibe. They fused their goddess Minerva with the local Sulis, creating Sulis Minerva, a hybrid deity overseeing this bubbling portal. Excavations in the 1970s revealed the temple's layout, facing east with a gorgon's head, flanked by pediments of Luna and Sol, balancing night and day, cold and hot, female and male. This wasn't imperial stomp, it was sensitive adaptation, monumentalizing Celtic sacred geography. But here's the eerie part. The spring brings up iron oxide, staining the black mud red, making it look like the ground is bleeding. Ancient visitors must have seen this as a sign from the underworld, a wound in the earth pulsing with lifeblood, offerings thrown in coins, curses on lead tablets, even body parts echo the Witham rituals. One curse pleads for the thief of a glove to lose their mind and eyes, a vengeful plea to the waters. Conspiracy buffs see this as evidence of a hidden cult, where Romans and Celts mingled in secret rites, perhaps even human sacrifices veiled as accidents. Think of the Lindo man, a bog body from Cheshire, ritually killed and preserved triple death by blow, garrote, and drowning, a Celtic offering to water gods. Bleeding is just chemistry, iron in the water oxidizing on contact with air. No supernatural hemorrhage, but it fueled beliefs for ages. Similarly, the dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg, hundreds compelled to dance uncontrollably for days. Some dying might link to waterborne ergotism from mouldy rye, a fungus thriving in damp conditions. Theorists tie it to ancient water rituals gone wrong, like ecstatic dances to invoke rain gods. But science points to mass hysteria amplified by famine and stress. In Britain, could similar plagues have arisen from fen fevers, misinterpreted as curses from disturbed water spirits? Delving deeper into Witham's secrets, the valley boasts one of Britain's densest clusters of monastic sites, 14 abbeys crammed into a 10-mile strip. Why so many? Practicality doesn't cut it. This was fervour with a purpose. Each abbey perches at a causeway's end, those ancient paths crossing treacherous fens. Crossing water was perilous, so folks offered piety or superstition to ensure safe passage. Swords as symbols of office returned to lords upon death, but for kings, to the divine lady in the lake. Arthur's tale codifies this. Illegitimate boy raised by Merlin, king via sword from stone, knights of the Round Table, slain and spirited to Avalon to sleep until needed. Conspiracy angles suggest these abbeys were built to surveil and suppress pagan holdouts. The name Lincoln, nearby, derives from Lindum, but Normans called it Nicor, meaning water spirit. Was the cathedral placed by the river to dominate that essence? Historians like Dave Stalker argue water connects everything Bronze Age barrows by shores, causeways over it, swords into it. A unifying thread, perhaps why Christianity latched on, converting idols rather than smashing them. Fast forward to medieval times. The last swords enter the Witham in the 14th century, just as armour starts hanging in churches over lords' tombs. A shift, but continuity pagan to Christian, water to stone. Some see this as the church's long game, absorbing rituals to control the masses, like how Viking axes split heads, but end up as offerings, blending warrior ethos with spiritual surrender. Now, tie this to broader mysteries. The dancing plague, ergot poisoning from wet harvests, causing hallucinations of uncontrollable movement. Perhaps survivors saw it as water gods' wrath for neglected rites. In Britain, fen argue, malaria, from marsh mosquitoes might have sparked similar dances, delirious victims writhing like possessed. Science explains it via plasmodium parasites, but ancients blamed offended nymphs. And the lady herself? Celtic lore brims with water goddesses Coventina at Carraburg, her well filled with pins and coins, or Sequana in Gaul, healer via sane sources. Excalibur's lady might be a composite, guarding Britain's essence. Conspiracy theorists claim she's a code for druid priestesses, hidden networks preserving knowledge through Roman times, like how some say the Grail is a symbol for matriarchal power suppressed by patriarchy. Archaeology backs resilience. At Cadbury, post-massacre rebuilds with Mediterranean pottery suggest trade and strength, not collapse. Locals believed it. Camelot, ploughing up Iron Age relics mixed with Roman, a battle site reborn. Excavations found timber halls, fortifications refurbished around Arthur's era, fueling the myth. But if these water rites endured, what forbidden knowledge did they carry into the shadows of Tintagel? What if the castle's ruins hide not just pottery, but portals to lost worlds where Arthur's heirs still wait? Hold that intrigue as our journey presses on. Nestled on the rugged cliffs of Cornwall, where the Atlantic crashes against jagged rocks like an eternal siege, Tintagel Castle stands as a sentinel of secrets, its ruins whispering tales that blur the line between legend and lost history. You've probably heard the romantic yarns Geoffrey of Monmouth's 12th century chronicle painting it as the birthplace of King Arthur. Conceived in a whirlwind of magic and deception, Uther Pendragon, disguised by Merlin's spell, slipping into the fortress to father the future king. But step beyond the myth, and what emerges from the windswept promontory is something far more tantalizing, a hub of shadowy trade, where Dark Age Britain didn't fade into obscurity but pulsed with connections to distant empires. What if Tintagel wasn't just a fairy tale cradle, but a clandestine port, funneling exotic goods and forbidden ideas across stormy seas? And why, in a time when Rome's grip had loosened, did Byzantine merchants risk everything to dock here, their cargoes hinting at deals that might have reshaped Europe? Let's wander these cliffs in our minds, feeling the salt spray and hearing the gulls' cries, as we unpack the digs that have peeled back Tintagel's layers. Back in the 1930s, archaeologist Raleigh Radford first scratched the surface, unearthing pottery shards that screamed of Mediterranean ties, proving this wasn't some isolated outpost but part of a vast trading web. Fast forward to the 90s, and a decade-long excavation led by the University of Glasgow turned up even more. Walls of a high-status settlement from the 5th to 7th centuries, fragments of fine glass from the Islamic world, and heaps of amphorae, those bulbous jars that once sloshed with olive oil and wine from Byzantium. These weren't casual finds. They pointed to a bustling elite enclave where locals feasted on imports that would make a Roman patrician jealous. Imagine the scene. Torchlit halls echoing with laughter, tables laden with North African red slipware and Phocaean pottery from what's now Turkey, all while the empire back east grappled with its own upheavals. What were these eastern traders really after? Cornwall's tin, that's the whisper. This humble metal, alloyed with copper to make bronze, had fueled civilizations for millennia. Recent studies, like one published in Antiquity just this year, trace Bronze Age tin from Devon and Cornwall all the way to the Levant, powering the forges of ancient Israel and beyond. By the Dark Ages, that trade hadn't dried up, it evolved. Divers off the Cornish coast have hauled up ingots, pure tin blocks shaped like astragals, ancient knucklebones from wrecks that might date to this era. One site near Bantham, a sandy sweep just down the shore, yielded 43 such ingots from a probable Byzantine shipwreck. Were these cargoes cursed, doomed by some ancient hex to protect Britain's mineral wealth? Folklore abounds with tales of sea spirits guarding the deeps, sinking vessels that dared plunder too greedily. Or perhaps it's simpler, treacherous reefs and gales that swallowed ships whole, their treasures lost until modern tech like sonar dredged them up. Speaking of Bantham, let's shift our gaze there, to a beach that looks idyllic today, golden sands curving into the River Avon estuary, a haven for surfers and sunbathers. But rewind 1500 years, and this was no lazy shore. It was a vortex of activity, a dark age trading post buzzing with deals that bridged worlds. Excavations in 2001, detailed in medieval archaeology, uncovered hearths eroding from cliffs, charcoal pits where meats roasted over open fires, and scatters of Byzantine pottery amphorae from the Aegean, fine wares from Carthage. These weren't solitary camps, they were party sites, seasonal gatherings where locals and foreigners mingled under starry skies. Picture it differently this time, not formal barters, but raucous feasts, flames flickering on faces from afar, amphorae cracked open to pour garnet, red wines spiced with eastern herbs. Archaeologists call them beach markets, but the vibe screams celebration, perhaps sealing pacts with toasts, sharing stories that wove Celtic lore with Byzantine intrigue. What fueled this frenzy? Tin, again, but with a twist of empire-building ambition. Emperor Justinian I, ruling from Constantinople in the 6th century, dreamed of reconquering the West's lost provinces. His armies swept through Italy and North Africa, but Britain? Too remote, or so history says. Yet, conspiracy-minded folks speculate these traders weren't just merchants. They were envoys, spies even, scouting alliances with Western kings. Imagine coded messages tucked in wine jars, offers of gold for tin and loyalty, all part of a grand scheme to pull Britain into Byzantium's orbit. The pottery hall at Tintagel, over a ton's worth, more than anywhere else in Western Europe, suggests elite sponsorship, maybe a local chieftain playing both sides, amassing wealth while whispering secrets back east. And those ingots? If they sank deliberately, perhaps it was sabotage, a rival tribe's curse, or a merchant's insurance scam gone awry. Isotopic analysis links Cornish tin to artifacts across the Mediterranean, proving the trade's scale. But wrecks, like the one off Bantham, likely fell to natural perils, currents and storms that turned profitable voyages into underwater tombs. This web of commerce echoes other vanishings, like the Norse in Greenland, a parallel mystery that adds another layer of wonder. Settled by Eric the Red around 986, those Viking outposts thrived for centuries, exporting walrus, ivory, and furs back to Europe. But by the 1400s, they were gone, farms abandoned, churches silent. What happened? Climate cooled in the Little Ice Age, glaciers creeping, but that's only part of it. Recent digs reveal drought as a killer dried up pastures, starving livestock, forcing tough choices. Some say they assimilated with Inuit, others perished in skirmishes or sailed away. Hans Egede, the Norwegian missionary who rediscovered the ruins in 1721, found no bodies, just eerie emptiness. Conspiracy theories swirl, a papal plot to erase pagan holdouts, or hidden migrations to America, predating Columbus. Science leans on pollen cores and ice samples showing environmental collapse, but the abrupt silence in records fuels the enigma. Like Tintagel's traders, did these Norse vanish into legend, their fates swallowed by isolation? Back to Cornwall, where Tintagel's cliffs hide more than meets the eye. The Artognu stone, unearthed in 1998, bears an inscription in Latin. Artognu, father of a descendant of Cole, has had this constructed. Misread, as Arthur at first. It's no smoking gun, but it nods to high-status folk with Roman echoes in a supposedly barbaric age. Conferences like the one in 2022 at Tintagel delved into this, presenting data on feasting halls and imported luxuries that paint a picture of sophistication. Videos and documentaries, like Pete Kelly's on YouTube, trace the site's full arc from Iron Age defences to Richard, Earl of Cornwall's 13th century castle, built to capitalize on Arthurian hype. Yet, the real thrill lies in the unanswered. Why so much Byzantine bling here, of all places? Was it a royal seat? A Camelot for real rulers brokering deals that kept Britain afloat while Rome crumbled? At Bantham, those beach hearths 5 or 6 feet across, littered with butchered bones, suggest not just trade, but cultural fusion. Celts adopting Eastern tastes, perhaps even ideas like monasticism trickling in with the wine. Guardians of these sites whisper of ghosts, shipwrecked spectral crews, or Arthur's knights patrolling the mists. Divers report eerie underwater silences around those ingots, as if the sea guards its loot jealously. Ponder this as we linger on the edge. If Tintagel's trade veiled diplomatic gambits, what other empires eyed Britain's shores? And if the Norse faded from Greenland's maps, could similar shadows have claimed Tintagel's elites, their vanishing a puzzle wrapped in salt and stone? What artifacts lie buried next, ready to rewrite the map? Shifting gears to those enigmatic Roman dodecahedrons, scattered across Britain, hollow bronze polyhedrons with 12 pentagonal faces, each hole a different size. Found in hoards from the 2nd to 4th centuries, they've baffled experts for decades. Calendars? Surveying tools? Or something more arcane, like dice for druidic divination, blending Roman craft with Celtic mysticism? One theory posits them as rangefinders for catapults, but their scarcity in military sites nixes that. Another, candle holders, but soot traces are absent. Conspiracy enthusiasts claim they're keys to a secret society, perhaps the Mithraic cult, where initiates use them in rituals echoing solar cycles, 12 faces for zodiac signs, holes for star alignments, perhaps weaving gloves or measuring pipes, given the varying apertures. But in a Dark Age context, could survivors have repurposed them as talismans against invaders? Linked to Tintagel's imports, maybe Byzantine traders carried similar enigmas, fusing Eastern esoterica with Western ways. Then there's the chalk drums from Folkestone, Yorkshire Neolithic carvings mimicking bone measures. But what for? Acoustic instruments? Or shamanic tools to summon spirits? Their precision hints at lost math, prefiguring the intellectual blooms we'll explore soon. As we chase these threads, the commerce at Tintagel feels alive, a bridge from myth to market. Those amphorae shards at Bantham, over 500 from the shore alone, speak of volumes traded, wine for tin, ideas flowing freer than the tides. Justinian's reconquest might have eyed Britain as a flank, his agents posing as merchants, mapping coasts for future fleets. The ingot's purity, 99.9% tin screams, ancient tech, their loss perhaps no accident, but a ritual sink, echoing water offerings from Witham. Greenland's Norse parallel sharpens the edge. Settlements like the Eastern and Western, thriving on ivory until climate bit back. Drought evidence from lake sediments shows water woes mirroring potential. Cornish shifts, did rising seas or drying mines doom the tin trade too? Egede's expedition found saga echoes but no people, much like Tintagel's post-7th century quiet. In this tapestry, Tintagel emerges not lost, but layered a kingdom where Arthur's ghost guards, Byzantine ghosts, trade secrets buried with the elite. What if the next dig uncovers a manifest, proving espionage amid the amphorae, or a map linking Cornwall to Constantinople's courts? Hold that spark of wonder. What if those vanished Norse hold clues to other disappearances, like the artifacts we'll unearth next, dodecahedrons whispering forgotten codes? Ever since I was a kid rummaging through dusty attics for forgotten treasures, I've been hooked on the thrill of holding history in my hands, those quiet objects that stare back at you, daring you to crack their codes. Tonight, On Mystery History for Sleep, let's step into that world together, but not through grand ruins or epic battles. No, we're going artifact hunting, piecing together the puzzle of post-Roman Britain one enigmatic relic at a time. These aren't just dusty museum pieces. They're whispers from a time when the empire's shadow lingered, and the Celts wove their old ways into something new. What secrets do they hold about the so-called Dark Ages? We're about to shine a light on some of the weirdest finds from that era, starting with the Roman Dodecahedron, a 12-sided bronze brain teaser that stumped experts for generations. Imagine you're in a dimly lit lab, the air humming with anticipation as you turn this thing over in your palms. It's about the size of a baseball, hollow inside, with each of its 12 pentagonal faces punched through with a circular hole, and every hole a different diameter, from tiny pinpricks to coin-sized gaps. Knobs jut out at the corners, like it's ready to lock into something bigger. These dodecahedrons pop up across Roman Britain and beyond, over 100 found so far, from the Scottish borders down to the Rhine. The first ones surfaced in the 18th century, but even today, in 2025, archaeologists are still scratching their heads. No ancient text mentions them, no fresco depicts their use. It's like they were a secret, passed hand to hand in the shadows of legionary camps or villa backrooms. One wild theory paints them as tools of a clandestine cult. Picture Mithraism, that mysterious Roman religion popular among soldiers, with its underground temples and zodiac symbolism. 12 faces for the 12 signs of the stars. Could these be ritual objects? Holes aligning with celestial events to channel divine energy? Some folks go further, suggesting a Druid Roman fusion, where Celtic seers smuggled their star lore into imperial ranks, using dodecahedrons to map ley lines or summon spirits during equinoxes. Imagine a moonlit gathering on a British hill fort, the bronze glinting as priests peer through holes at the heavens, whispering incantations that blended Latin chants with ancient Gaelic. Conspiracy buffs love this angle. It's got that whiff of forbidden knowledge, like a precursor to the Knights Templar guarding cosmic secrets. But let's not get carried away without the facts. Recent digs, like the one in Norton Disney, Lincolnshire, in 2023, found a pristine example buried deliberately, perhaps as an offering. Scientific scans show no wear from practical use, hinting it might be symbolic, not utilitarian. On the flip side, cooler heads propose everyday explanations. Maybe surveying gear those varying holes could gauge distances on battlefields, lining up sites like a primitive theodolite. A 2024 study in the Journal of Archaeological Science tested replicas, finding they work decently for measuring pipe diameters or even as glove-knitting frames, the knobs holding yarn taut. Picture a Roman matron in a chilly British villa, clicking away on woolen mittens for her legionary husband. Or, as some engineers argue, candle holders, the holes letting wax drip through while knobs stabilize on uneven surfaces. But why no soot residue on most? And why cluster in the northwest provinces, far from Rome's heart? It's these gaps that keep the mystery alive, making you wonder if they were multi-tools for travelers, or even toys for elite kids, rolling like dice in games of fate. Shifting our hunt to something even older, but tied to the same enigmatic vibe, let's pick up the Folkestone drums, 3 chalk cylinders unearthed in 1889 from a child's grave in Yorkshire. They're not actual drums, mind you, solid as stones, about the size of coffee mugs, etched with swirling motifs that look like eyes, brows, and geometric whorls. Found in a Neolithic barrow near Folkestone village, they date back 5,000 years, predating the Romans, but echoing into their era through shared ritual echoes. What were they for? A kid's toys? Shamanic rattles? Or something more profound, like blueprints for the cosmos? Digital imaging from a 2015 Cambridge study revealed the carvings aren't random. They mirror motifs on passage tombs like Newgrange in Ireland, with spirals that might represent the sun's path or lunar cycles. One theory, acoustic devices, hollow just enough to produce tones when struck, guiding chants in megalithic ceremonies. Imagine a Neolithic gathering at Stonehenge's precursor, these drums thumping rhythms to align stones with solstices. But a 2018 paper in Antiquity flips the script their measuring tools. Wrap a string around them, and the circumferences match ancient units. The smallest equals a long foot of about 10.4 inches, scaling up to match Stonehenge's Sarsen circle. Could these be the calipers of prehistoric architects, passed down through generations until Roman engineers encountered similar Celtic tech? Some say they're encoded maps, the eyes symbolizing portals to other realms, hidden from invaders. Link it to the phantom time hypothesis, that wild idea of 300 missing years in the Dark Ages, and maybe these drums were recalibration devices, ensuring sacred measurements survived historical rewrites. Chalk from local quarries, carvings done with flint tools, no evidence of sound-making wear. They're likely prestige items, buried with a child to honor lineage, their designs echoing grooved ware pottery from the same era. Now, let's unearth a darker find. The headless Romans, skeletons stripped of their skulls in burials that chill the bone. Picture the scene at Driffield Terrace in York. 80 bodies from the 3rd century, 45 decapitated, heads placed at feet or between legs like macabre footnotes. Discovered in 2004 during rail works, this was no ordinary cemetery. Isotope analysis in a 2011 Journal of Archaeological Science paper shows these folks hailed from exotic spots: the Alps, Mediterranean, even the Middle East. Were they gladiators, executed in the arena, their heads trophies, or slaves, beheaded in rituals to bind their spirits as guardians? Theories abound. 1. Military executions, heads removed to prevent ghosts from rising, a Roman fear rooted in lore like the headless horseman myths. At Somersham in Cambridgeshire, a 2021 dig revealed 17 decapitated in a 52-grave site, blades slicing clean through vertebrae, suggesting professional axemen. Conspiracy whispers of a cult purge, perhaps Christians or Mithraists targeted in purges under emperors like Decius. Imagine secret societies meeting in British villas, their dodecahedrons ritual props, until betrayal led to mass beheadings. But archaeology tempers the drama. These were mostly young men, robust builds hinting at fighters or labourers, prone burials, face down, a mark of shame for criminals. Linking to lock rings, those Bronze Age gold enigmas shaped like hollow triangles, often found in pairs. A 2017 hoard in Cumbria yielded 3, bound with wire, alongside a bracelet pure gold, exquisitely crafted. Dating to 800 BC, they might be hair ornaments, slipping through locks like ancient barrettes. But why hoard them? Ritual offerings, perhaps echoing water deposits but buried on land. A 2014 academia paper notes wax and wood cores in some, suggesting composite construction for lightness. Theories: status symbols for elite women, or talismans warding evil, their shapes mimicking lunar phases. Conspiracy fans see them as keys, literal or symbolic, to lost Celtic tech, perhaps aligning with dodecahedrons in a pan-European mystery school. Science says jewellery, with parallels in Irish penannular rings. Yet, their scarcity fuels wonder. Were they melted down post-Conquest, survivors hidden from Roman taxmen? Weaving these artifacts together paints post-Roman Britain as a cauldron of continuity, where Celtic roots tangled with imperial remnants. Dodecahedrons in villas, drums' measures echoing in henges, headless warnings in graves, lock rings glinting in hoards, all threads in a tapestry of resilience. What if they formed a network, tools for a shadow elite preserving knowledge through turmoil? As we sift these relics, one question nags. If these objects guarded secrets, what forbidden wisdom did they encode for the pharaoh's triumphs we'll uncover next? Let's flip the script on what you think you know about the Roman stomp into Britain, because if history's taught us anything, it's that the victors don't just write the books. They sometimes rewrite the whole calendar to suit their schemes. Picture yourself as a fly on the wall in the year 43 AD, when Emperor Claudius's legions splash ashore, not in a blaze of conquest glory, but maybe, just maybe, as invited guests to a royal squabble. At the centre of this intrigue, a British king named Verica, whose story reads like a thriller scripted by a master of deception. Was he a savvy diplomat extending a hand to Rome for mutual gain, or the unwitting pawn in a grand imperial plot to swallow his kingdom whole. And what if the real conspiracy runs deeper, with threads pulling all the way to a theory that chunks of history itself were faked to cover up inconvenient truths? Buckle up, because we're about to dissect this like detectives on a cold case, sifting clues from coins, palaces, and phantom timelines that might just make you question everything from 4 to 3 AD to 4 to 10. First off, meet Verica, not some shadowy figure from myth, but a flesh-and-blood ruler of the Atrebates tribe, a Belgic people hunkered down in what's now Sussex and Hampshire. He pops up around 15 AD, stepping into power after his brother Epilus, and he's got pro-Roman stamped all over him. His coins tell the tale, gold staters minted with his name, flaunting Latin inscriptions and imagery that screams alliance. One side might show a vine leaf hello, Roman wine culture, while the other boasts Rex, the Latin for king, a title Rome handed out like candy to friendly locals. Verica wasn't just surviving. He was thriving on trade deals, shipping British goods across the Channel and soaking up imperial vibes. But trouble brewed from the north, where the Catuvellauni tribe, led by heavy hitters like Epictetus and then Caratacus, started nibbling at his turf. By around 40 AD, Verica's kingdom shrinks to a sliver around Chichester, hemmed in by earthworks that look more like desperate defences than confident borders. Here's where the plot thickens. Verica bolts to Rome, pleading for help. Roman historian Dio Cassius spills the beans. A guy named Bericus, that's our Verica, convinces Claudius to send troops under Aulus Plautius. Suetonius chimes in, mentioning Britons demanding the return of deserters, which smells like Verica and maybe his kin Adminius, who'd fled earlier under Caligula's nose. So, was this an invasion or an intervention? Traditional history leans conquest, with Richborough in Kent as the beachhead, legions storming ashore to crush resistance. But dig a little, and whispers emerge of a softer landing at Chichester Harbour, smack in Verica's backyard. Why? To liberate his lands from those pesky Catuvellauni, restoring a loyal puppet. No massive battles in his core territory, no refortified hill forts. It all points to locals rolling out the welcome mat, or at least not fighting back hard. But let's crank up the suspicion dial. What if Verica's invitation was engineered from the start? Conspiracy theorists point to his coins aping Roman styles decades before the boots hit the ground. Classical imagery, emperor heads like Augustus popping up in graves. Was Verica groomed as a Roman asset? His kingdom a testing ground for cultural takeover? Think satellite states, cozying up to superpowers, like Cold War proxies. Some fringe voices even speculate Verica was in on a deeper game, trading sovereignty for personal power, only to get sidelined once the legions dug in. His fate? Vanishes from records after 43, maybe restored briefly, maybe not. Enter Tiberius Claudius Cogidubnus, the new kid on the block, possibly Verica's heir or relative, gifted chunks of territory for his loyalty. Tacitus gushes about Cogidubnus staying faithful down to our own times, but the handover reeks of Roman puppet mastery. Now, zoom in on Fishbourne Roman Palace. Verica's potential parting gift, or was it? This sprawling complex near Chichester dwarfs Buckingham Palace, with over 100 rooms, imported Italian tiles stacking 100 tons, and mosaics that scream luxury. Discovered in 1960 when a water main trench hit pay dirt, excavations led by Barry Cunliffe unveiled a beast. Colonnades, hypercaust heating, bath suites, and gardens straight out of Pompeii, built around 75 AD. But wait, pre-invasion traces lurk beneath. Pottery from before 43, a gold signet ring inscribed Tiberius Claudius Catuarus, and that marble bust of a child, maybe young Cogidubnus himself, carved in Rome. Theories swirl. Was this Verica's pad, upgraded post-invasion as a thank you, or Cogidubnus's reward for playing ball? The palace's Domus Flavia vibes, mirroring Domitian's Roman digs, hint at imperial favoritism, perhaps a franchise of Rome plopped in Britain to Romanize the elite. But here's the rabbit hole. What if the whole timeline's a sham, a cover-up to hide that Rome never fully left? Enter the phantom time hypothesis, cooked up by Heribert Illig in 1991. This wild ride claims 297 years from 614 to 911 AD, was straight up invented by Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II around 1000. Why? To plop themselves neatly into the millennium, faking Charlemagne and the Carolingians to legitimize Otto's empire. Forged docs, tweaked calendars, the works. Now, tie this to Roman Britain. If early medieval history's bogus, what about the withdrawal in 410? Illig's crew points to scarce artifacts from those phantom years, dodgy dendrochronology, and Romanesque architecture popping up too soon. Like the Romans never really packed up. Apply it here, and Verica's invitation morphs into a long con. Maybe the invasion was staged to install spies, a network lingering post-410, pulling strings from shadows. Think about it. No mass exodus of Romans. Locals just kept Romanizing under the radar. Phantom time critics like astronomer Stefan Matthiessen in 2002 slam it with solar eclipse records from 59 AD. Pliny nailed it. And Halley's comet sightings aligning with real astronomy. Dendro rings and carbon dating hold firm, no 3-century gap. But the theory's allure? It explains dark voids as deliberate erasures, perhaps to bury Celtic resilience or Gnostic heresies bubbling in villas like Chedworth. Speaking of Chedworth, this Gloucestershire gem ties right in a villa, so opulent it screams conspiracy. 80-metre mosaics, underfloor heat, 2 bathhouses, and a nymphaeum shrine to water spirits. Owner, likely a Romanized Briton from the Dabuni tribe, playing the Empire's game. But those mosaics mix pagan and Christian vibes, Bellerophon slaying monsters on winged Pegasus, symbolizing good over evil or immortal ascent. Gnostic hints? Absolutely. A cult blending philosophy and myth, seeking secret knowledge to transcend the mortal coil. Emperor Theodosius banned it in 380 as heresy, smashing fonts and burying treasures. At Chedworth, damaged lead tanks whisper of that crackdown, perhaps part of a broader plot to stamp out independent thinkers who threatened Rome's control. Verica's angle fits. His pro-Roman tilt might have masked Gnostic sympathies, inviting legions to protect esoteric circles from northern rivals. Conspiracy nuts link this to phantom time, those missing years hiding Gnostic texts or Celtic-Roman hybrids. Science rebutes. Radiocarbon dates from Chedworth's floors peg them firmly in the 4th century. No phantoms. But the mosaics fusion classical myths with Christian immortality shows Britain's elite weren't passive victims. They adapted, absorbing influences while clinging to old souls. Ponder Verica's exile, fleeing to Claudius. Was it desperation, or a calculated move in a chess game spanning empires? Coins from his reign show Augustus medallions in graves, gifts, sealing pacts, perhaps. If phantom time's even half right, these artifacts might be backdated forgeries, propping a timeline that buries Britain's true independence post-Rome. If Verica's invite veiled a spy web, what ghosts did Rome leave behind in 410, ready to stir when the legions withdrew? And how does that echo the rise of mysterious leaders we'll meet next? You know, sometimes history feels less like a straight line and more like a winding path through a fog-shrouded moor, where every step uncovers a footprint that doesn't quite match the map. I've always loved those moments when the ground shifts under your feet literally, in the case of post-Roman Britain. We're talking about the year 410, when Emperor Honorius supposedly scribbled a note telling the Brits to fend for themselves, pulling the plug on 4 centuries of imperial oversight. But what if that withdrawal was more smoke and mirrors than a clean break? What if the Romans didn't vanish overnight, leaving a vacuum for chaos, but instead seeded the landscape with hidden strongholds and enigmatic leaders who rose from the ruins? Could these mysterious lords have been Roman holdouts in disguise, or Celtic chieftains reclaiming their thrones with a wink from the empire? The clues are buried in places like Wroxeter and Burdeswold, where the stones themselves seem to murmur secrets, if you listen close enough. Let's start our trek in the gentle Shropshire Hills, where the remains of Wroxeter, once Viriconium, the 4th largest Roman city in Britain, sprawl like a forgotten giant. The basilica's columns toppled, bathhouses silent, but beneath it all, a pulse that refuses to fade. Victorian diggers in the 1850s romanticized it as a poignant ruin, a testament to empire's fall. But fast forward to the 1990s, and a team led by Roger White flips the narrative. They didn't just find Roman foundations, they uncovered massive timber structures slapped right on top, dating to the 5th and 6th centuries, long after the supposed lights went out. One building alone was a monster, 100 feet long, its rubble platform recycled from demolished Roman walls, supporting a hall that could host feasts for dozens. Who built this? Not wandering barbarians, but organized locals with Roman know-how, measuring in feet that matched imperial standards. It's like the city didn't die. It evolved, shedding its stone skin for wood and thatch, perhaps under the command of a shadowy overlord who commanded resources like a mini-emperor. What makes this tingle with mystery is the sheer audacity rebuilding on a grand scale when history says society should have been crumbling. Conspiracy whispers suggest these weren't native upstarts, but Roman loyalists left behind as a rearguard, a stay-behind network to keep tabs on the frontier. Think modern analogies, like Cold War sleeper cells, embedded to stir, if needed. No direct proof, of course, but the lack of coins post-410 may be deliberate to avoid imperial taxes while maintaining control. Science steps in with ground-penetrating radar from recent surveys, mapping unseen structures that hint at continuity, granaries repurposed, roads maintained. Pollen cores from nearby bogs tell a tale too. No explosion of wildwood overtaking fields, but steady farming, with birch creeping in only marginally. Those ghost forests, some locals swear by ethereal mists, where trees once stood might be folklore masking hidden groves, perhaps sacred spots where these lords stashed Roman gold or conducted clandestine rites. Shift north now, to the wind-whipped ramparts of Hadrian's Wall, where Burdaswald Fort guards a stretch of turf that once marked Rome's northern edge. This wasn't some sleepy outpost. It was a bustling garrison, home to 1,000 soldiers and their families, defending against Pictish raids. When the legions withdrew, textbooks claim abandonment, but archaeologist Tony Wilmot's digs in the 1990s paint a different canvas. Peeling back layers in the granaries, his team hit jackpot. Roman timber halls, one a whopping open-plan behemoth with a thatched roof, struts supported on stone pads that screamed permanence. Built around 450, this wasn't a squatter's shack. It was a power center, the first sight greeting visitors through the fort's gates. Who lorded over it? A hereditary commander, perhaps, morphing into a petty king as central authority fizzled. The artifacts, pottery shards, iron tools show no break, just adaptation, with locals taxing the populace in exchange for protection, a racket that echoes medieval feudalism. The intrigue deepens with whispers of haunted cohorts, legends of spectral Roman soldiers marching the wall at dusk, reported even today by hikers. Could these be echoes of real holdouts? Units that stayed put, blending into the landscape? A 2022 geophysical survey by English Heritage revealed more late-phase buildings along the wall, suggesting a network of fortified holdfasts. Pollen data from Crag Low nearby Baxit. Farmland persisted, with only slight woodland regrowth. No wholesale abandonment. Those ghost woods? Folklore claims they conceal buried Roman payrolls, caches of silver denarii hidden during withdrawal panics. Divers and metal detectorists have pulled coins from lakes, fueling theories of deliberate dumps to fund future rebellions. Science demystifies. Dendrochronology dates timbers to the 5th century. Pollen shifts tie to minor climate dips, not catastrophe. But let's chase the lead literally. Post-Roman lead mining in places like the Mendip Hills pulsed on, and shadow industry that some say powered these rising lords. Roman minae spat out tons for pipes and roofs, but after 410, output dipped only slightly, with ingots stamped in ways hinting at local control. A 2019 study in archaeometry used isotopes to trace Mendip lead in artifacts across Europe, showing trade didn't halt. Conspiracy angle. Perhaps Roman engineers stayed, forming guilds that doubled as spy rings, funneling metal to Byzantine contacts while propping puppet kings. Think of it lead tanks with Chi-Rho symbols, crumpled and buried, not as scrap but as ritual burials to ward off imperial audits. Gnostic ties? Those heretics loved symbols. Maybe these lords dabbled, blending Christianity with old ways to legitimize rule. Wander with me to York, where the Roman fortress Eboracum morphed into a Saxon stronghold, but not without mysteries. Potteries churned out calcite-gritted ware into the 5th century, defying the end narrative. A 2024 reassessment by Mark Wyman argues these shards prove urban life ticked on, perhaps under a council of ex-legionaries turned warlords. The pollen story repeats. Open landscapes, no forest takeover, suggesting these enigmatic figures commanded labour to keep fields tilled. These lords, who were they? Shadows like Vortigern, the High King who allegedly invited Saxons in 449, or Ambrosius Aurelianus, the Roman-named Brit who rallied against them. Gildas's 6th century rants paint Vortigern as a tyrant, but was he a Roman remnant, his invitation a ploy to balance powers? Conspiracy buffs see a web. These figures as imperial plants, ensuring Britain stayed a buffer zone. Phantom time echoes here too, if years were faked. Maybe the Withdrawal was a myth to erase these hybrids' reigns. Excavations at Roxeter's big building in 2023 used AI modelling to reconstruct feasts, pollen identifying imported spices. At Burdeswald, where on thresholds shows heavy use into the 6th century. As the fog lifts, these lords emerge not as barbarians but bridge builders, their rise a quiet revolution. But if they guarded Roman secrets, what religious storms brewed in their shrines? Storms we'll stir next. The pollen doesn't lie fields stayed green, but what if those ghost forests hid more than treasure, like portals to the divine upheavals ahead? Have you ever stood by a bubbling spring, watching steam rise like whispers from the underworld, and wondered if the water itself holds memories of gods long forgotten? In the heart of Somerset, at the Roman baths of Aquae Sulis, now simply Bath, the earth exhales hot springs that have drawn seekers for millennia, blending the divine with the everyday, in ways that still send shivers down my spine. I find these places magnetic, portals where pagan whispers meet Christian echoes, and where the arrival of Quito Jiao in Britain unfolds not as a conquest, but a mysterious fusion that hid as much as it revealed. From the hybrid goddess Sulis Minerva, guarding her crimson-stained pools, to the fiery writings of monk Gildas railing against kings, this era's religious riddles challenge everything. Were these shifts divine providence, or a clever veil for ancient secrets that powerful forces wanted buried? The story bubbles up at Bath, where the springs gush forth 1,000,000 litres daily, hot enough to scald the unwary. Long before Romans planted their sandals here in the 1st century AD, this was a Celtic holy site, revered for eons artifacts, traced back to 7000 BC, Mesolithic flints scattered like offerings. The Celts called the presiding spirit Sulis, a healer and avenger, her waters a conduit to the other world. When the invaders arrived, they didn't bulldoze, they adapted, merging Sulis with their own Minerva, goddess of wisdom and war. The result? A temple complex that's a masterclass in cultural sleight of hand. Grand pediments with Gorgon heads glaring eastward, Luna's chariot racing the night sky on one side, Sol's spiky crown blazing on the other. It's a cosmic balance, male and female, hot and cold, light and shadow, all monumentalized around that steaming heart. Excavations in the 1970s, led by Barry Cunliffe, uncovered this sacred geometry. The temple precinct, ordered like a celestial map, hinting at Iron Age roots peeking through Roman marble. But dip deeper, and the intrigue surfaces. The spring's iron-rich waters crust the mud red, making the ground appear to bleed a visceral sight that must have awed ancients, evoking blood sacrifices or earth's wounds. Offerings plunged in, thousands of coins, jewelry, even curse tablets etched with pleas for vengeance. May he who stole my gloves lose his mind and eyes, one begs Sulis Minerva, a petty theft turned divine vendetta. Were these acts pure devotion, or coded resistance? Some theorists posit a hidden cult here, where Celts and Romans mingled in esoteric rites, the hybrid goddess, a front for preserving pagan lore amid imperial eyes. Imagine whispered gatherings at dusk. Initiates sharing forbidden knowledge, perhaps. Gnostic whispers already seeping in from the east, blending creation myths with water's transformative power. Conspiracy angles ramp up. Was this fusion a Vatican precursor, the Church later co-opting such sites to sanitize pagan power? Science offers clarity. The red hue is simple oxidation, iron meeting air, no supernatural bleed. Yet, the site's draw endured, pulling pilgrims through the Dark Ages. Its baths a bridge between worlds. As Rome's grasp loosened in the 4th century, Christianity surged under Constantine the Great, who in 312 at Milvian Bridge saw a cross in the sky and flipped the empire's faith. But in Britain, this wasn't a clean swap. It was a murky brew. At Chedworth Villa, that Gloucestershire jewel, mosaics tell of intellectual ferment Bellerophon on Pegasus slaying beasts, symbols of transcending mortality. Dominic Perring's work spots Gnostic fingerprints, a cult obsessed with escaping the prison of the world through secret gnosis, blending philosophy, myth, and Christ. 4th century elites here debated arcane truths, perhaps viewing the material realm as a demiurge's trap, salvation in hidden wisdom. But by 380, Emperor Theodosius branded it heresy, edicts flying to exile adherents and smash their tools. Those crumpled lead tanks we find buried, baptismal fonts, hacked apart and dumped in wells to halt the spread. At Water-Newton, a silver hoard from the same era chalices, spoons buried like contraband, perhaps decommissioning sacred gear before inquisitors struck. What fuels the fire of curiosity is how these heretics might connect to broader plots. Conspiracy theorists dub it the Vatican Veil. Early church fathers like Augustine suppressing Gnostic texts to consolidate power, much like Nag Hammadi's hidden Gospels unearthed in 1945, revealing alternate Jesuses. In Britain, was Gnosticism a Celtic holdout? Sulis Minerva's waters symbolizing purification rites that echoed older Druidic immersions. Imagine villa owners at Chedworth hosting underground salons, mosaics as coded maps to enlightenment, while Rome's spies lurked. Science tempers. These were philosophical debates in a fermenting era, elites escaping mortality's grind through intellect, not sorcery. Edicts targeted baptism to starve the flock. Explains Perring no fonts, no growth. But the buried treasures speak of fear, identities under siege. Enter Gildas, the 6th century monk, whose De Excidio et Conquestu Britanniae scorches like a prophet's tirade. Writing around 540 from a Welsh monastery, he lambasts Britain's kings as tyrants, their sins inviting Saxon scourges. But peel his Latin flowery, laced with classical nods, and you see a scholar plugged into Europe's intellectual grid. Gildas quotes Virgil, cites scripture, his prose, a beacon in the dark. He rails at the post-Roman rot but attests to a thriving church, bishops intact, monasticism blooming. From Cadiz Island off Wales, where Byzantine pottery mingles with early Christian stones, Gildas emerges as no isolated crank but a networker, his works influencing continental founders like Columbanus. Conspiracy buzz. Was Gildas part of a monastic conspiracy, preserving Latin purity to counter Roman dilution? His era's inscribed stones scattered across the West, etched with rhythmic verse like Cadfan lies here in this heap of stones hide layers. Read backward for hexameters, count by sevens for hidden names like Viola. David Howlett's dictionaries decode this as elite code, a literate society veiling messages in memorials. These stones aren't clumsy scrawls. They're sophisticated, implying readers are plenty, even in remote spots. From Cadiz's cross-marked slab praying for Cadfan's soul to others with acrostics, they scream continuity, Latin thriving without Romance interference. Brits learning by the book like modern polyglots. Conspiracy fans see a guardian order, monks as keepers of forbidden law, Gnostic echoes in their verses. Phantom time ties in. If centuries were faked, Gildas's dark woes might mask a golden interlude of Celtic, Christian synergy. Science rebutes carbon dates, pin stones to the 5th, 6th centuries. Linguistics trace Celtic structures in English, proving contact, not erasure. Yet the tingle persists. From Sulis's bleeding springs to Gildas's venom, Britain's faith journey hides undercurrents. Constantine's cross? Perhaps a solar halo, science says. but his edict made Christianity state religion, paving purges. In Britain, it fused with water rites, baptisms in sacred pools, echoing offerings. At Lullingstone Villa, a converted chapel with mixed mosaics hints at Gnostic holdouts, philosophy trumping dogma. As these layers unfold, one enigma beckons. If monastic minds like Gildas guarded secrets, what Eastern envoys brought to their shores, whispers of diplomacy or deeper designs? And how did those Byzantine threads weave into the tapestry ahead? Close your eyes and let your mind drift across the choppy waves of the Atlantic, where 6th century ships creak under the weight of secrets as heavy as their cargoes. I've often pondered those ancient mariners, Byzantine traders, from the glittering courts of Constantinople, braving tempests, to reach Britain's misty shores. Were they mere merchants chasing tin and profit, or agents of Emperor Justinian's grand vision, weaving a web of diplomacy that bordered on conquest? This chapter of Dark Age Britain pulses with that question, a riddle wrapped in amphorae shards and sunken ingots, where commerce might have masked ambitions to reclaim the West's lost fringes. Envision a vessel like the Yassi Ada wreck, a 7th century Byzantine hulk, discovered off Turkey's coast in 1961, its hold crammed with amphorae, iron tools, and pottery that mirror finds from Britain's west. Now transpose that to Cornwall's treacherous reefs, where similar cargoes washed ashore 1500 years ago. At Tintagel, that clifftop enigma we touched on earlier, archaeologists in the 1980s unearthed over a ton of Eastern Mediterranean pottery red slip wares from North Africa, Phocaean slips from Anatolia dating to the 5th and 6th centuries. This wasn't pocket change, it was elite stuff, enough to stock banquets for kings. Charles Thomas, who led those digs after a wildfire stripped the turf in 1983, described the revelation. Rectangular huts crowding the plateau, their floors littered with shards that screamed of far-flung connections. Why here, on this windswept headland? Tin, the lifeblood of bronze, lured them Cornwall's mines, yielding the metal that fueled Byzantine forges back home. But peel the onion, and layers of intrigue emerge. Justinian, enthroned in 527, wasn't content with his eastern realm. He launched reconquests that reclaimed Italy, North Africa, and Spain by 565. Britain, Rome's old outpost, might have been next on the list, a strategic flank against barbarians, its tin vital for weapons and coins. Historians like Procopius chronicled Justinian's wars. But what if those traders were scouts, their wine jars hiding missives for local lords? At Bantham Beach, Devon, where hearths erode from cliffs like forgotten campfires, Simon Timberlake's 2020 digs revealed feasting sites, charcoal pits with butchered bones, Byzantine amphorae scattered amid local wares. These beach markets weren't casual swaps, they were rendezvous, perhaps where envoys gauged alliances. Imagine the scene under a harvest moon, flames dancing on eastern faces, amphorae cracked to pour spiced vintages, while Cornish chieftains bartered tin for promises of aid against Saxon pressures. The tin trail deepens the plot. Divers off Cornwall in the 1990s hauled up ingots 99.9% pure, shaped like ancient gaming pieces from sites like the one near Bantham. A 2023 isotopic study in PLOS 1 traced similar metal to Byzantine artifacts, proving the flow. But why sink so many? Accidents on reefs, shore currents and storms devouring hulls. Yet folklore spins darker yarns. Sea spirits cursing greedy fleets, or deliberate scuttlings to deny rivals. Conspiracy theorists amp it up, Justinian's agents sabotaging their own to stage losses, justifying military escorts that doubled as invasion probes. Think of the Vandals' sack of Rome in 455. Justinian avenged it by conquering their African kingdom in 533. Could Britain have been a similar target? Its trade a Trojan horse? Weave in parallels from other eras to heighten the curiosity, the Silk Road's shadowy caravans, where spices masked espionage, or the Hanseatic League's medieval merchants doubling as diplomats. In Britain, sites like Cadiz Island off Wales echo this. A single Byzantine sherd amid monastic ruins, suggesting Eastern monks or traders seeding Christianity with imperial agendas. Jonathan Wooding's research highlights how monasticism arrived with these ships, providing leadership in Rome's wake. Gildas himself, our fiery monk from earlier, might have drawn from Byzantine texts, his Latin polished, his theology continental. Was this trade in ideas innocent, or a soft power conquest? Procopius's secret history trashes Justinian as a tyrant. Perhaps his Western outreach hid demonic ambitions, as the chronicler claimed. Amphora residues analysed in a 2019 Oxford study reveal olive oil, wine, and garum sauce luxuries, implying high-status exchanges. At Tintagel, carbon dates pin the pottery to 500 to 600, overlapping Justinian's reign. But the volume more imports here than all Gauls suggests favoritism, perhaps a client king like those Rome propped earlier. These were bribes, tin for allegiance, paving a reconquest that fizzled with plagues and wars back east. The bubonic plague of 541, ravaging Constantinople, might have scuttled plans, traders carrying rats alongside relics. Shift to the Witham Valley's monastic cluster, 14 abbeys in 10 miles, perched on ancient causeways like sentinels. Dave Stalker and Paul Everson argue water's the key. Crossings demanded offerings, evolving from swords to prayers. Byzantine influence? Perhaps via traders, their orthodox vibes blending with Celtic monasticism. Irish saints like Columba, founding Iona in 563, carried eastern echoes, desert fathers' asceticism filtering west. Was this a conquest of souls, Justinian's missionaries softening Britain for secular grabs? The hook? Those sunken ingots, pure tin. But one theory whispers alchemical pursuits, Byzantines seeking philosophers' stone alloys. Science says metallurgy, but the purity intrigues. At Bantham, 500 shards from the shore hint at massive scale, dozens of ships yearly, perhaps fleets with hidden agendas. As waves lap these tales, one puzzle swells. If Byzantine trade veiled conquest, what monastic minds absorbed their whispers? Minds like those scripting intellectual dawns ahead. And could those buyer stones hold codes to it all? The plague halted Justinian, but what if his ghost fleet lingered? Ideas conquering where armies couldn't. In the swirling mists of Dark Age Britain, far from being an intellectual blackout, we find sparks of genius flickering brighter than before, buyer stones etched with verses that hide codes, monastic minds forging the bedrock of European thought, all with a twist of secrecy that makes you wonder, were these scholars guardians of forbidden knowledge or unwitting players in a grand esoteric game? Our decryption begins with Gildas, that enigmatic 6th century monk, whose words crackle like lightning across the page. Holed up in a Welsh monastery around 540, he unleashes De Excidio et Conquestu Britanniae, a blistering takedown of Britain's rulers, branding them tyrants whose sins invited divine wrath in the form of Saxon invaders. But don't mistake this for a rant. It's a masterpiece of Latin flair, peppered with Virgilian echoes and biblical thunder, aimed at an audience savvy enough to catch the references. Gildas wasn't scribbling in isolation. He was plugged into a vibrant network, his theology influencing continental heavyweights like Columbanus, who cited him to popes. Recent scholarship, like a 2025 paper in the Journal of Medieval Latin, highlights how Gildas's style, rhythmic, elusive, mirrors classical oratory, suggesting he drew from libraries that survived Rome's fall. But here's the twist. Was Gildas part of a clandestine circle, his exile a cover to preserve unorthodox ideas? Conspiracy whispers point to Gnostic undercurrents in his work, hints of secret salvation through knowledge, echoing suppressed texts like those from Nag Hammadi. Imagine him as a whistleblower, his excidy not just lament but encoded warning, perhaps veiling Celtic druidic wisdom under Christian robes. Those buyer stones scattered across Western Britain amp up the code-breaking thrill over 1,000 known, from Cornwall to Wales, inscribed in Latin or Ogham scripts that date from the 5th to 7th centuries. Take the Cadfan stone on Anglesey. Cadfan lies here in this heap of stones, it reads, but flip it backward, and you've got a flawless dactylic hexameter, classical poetry in reverse. David Howlett's 2025 update in the Oxford Medieval Dictionary deciphers more, count every 7th letter, and names like Viola emerge, perhaps the scribe or a hidden patroness. A 2024 find in Coventry, a garden rock with 1600-year-old Ogham, an Irish alphabet of slashes went on display, its message pleading for a soul's peace. But why these reversals and skips? Some say steganography messages concealed for elite eyes, a guardian code to transmit lore amid invasions. Think of it. In a supposedly illiterate age, these stones imply readers everywhere, from hilltops to hamlets, a network of literati defying the dark label. The 7 liberal arts add a cosmic layer to this puzzle: grammar, rhetoric, logic for the human realm, arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy for the divine. Boethius codified them in the 6th century. But Britain's role? Howlett argues the Isles were the crucible, their pure Latin untainted by Romance tongues birthing this framework. A 2025 conference at Bodleian Library showcased stones with Adonic verse, the oldest in Europe, suggesting Brits pioneered meters that fueled later literatures. Twist it with mystery. Were the arts a universe code? Their 7 pillars unlocking reality's secrets, perhaps druidic math blended with Pythagorean vibes. Conspiracy buffs see a shadow academy, monks as heirs to Alexandria's library, hiding esoteric math from church censors. Recent AI analysis of stone patterns, published in Antiquity this year, reveals fractals mimicking natural forms, rivers, stars hinting at proto-science. Gildas's era buzzes with this intellect, his work known to Pope Gregory the Great, who in 597 sent Augustine to convert the Anglo-Saxons, but Britain already hummed with bishops and scholars. From Cadiz, Byzantine shards mingle with stones like the Cadfan slab, its verse a rhythmic prayer. A 2025 podcast on Dartmoor inscribed stones explores their Dark Age tags, revealing solar alignments, astronomy in action. Ogham's slashes? Perhaps binary precursors, encoding data for initiates. But the enigmatic twist: if Latin thrived by the book, was it a resistance code against dilution? Phantom time theorists claim fabricated centuries hid this bloom. Otto III faking docs to bury Celtic intellect. Science counters dendrodate stones firmly. Linguistics trace Celtic in English syntax. As we decipher, questions swirl. If Bayer hid names like Viola, what melodies did they play in music's art? And how did this intellect seed monastic blooms welcoming Eastern whispers ahead? Those fractals on stones, nature's code or human mimicry, what if they map to Byzantine trades, unlocking the scribe's next secrets? Have you ever stared at an old family photo, wondering if the smiles hide deeper stories, alliances forged in whispers, rivalries buried under polite nods? That's the vibe I get when peering into the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain, a tale that shaped our sense of Englishness for centuries. I can't help but treat this like a historical whodunit, with the venerable Bede as our prime suspect in a plot that might have rewritten identities to suit the powers that be. Was the arrival of these Germanic tribes a brutal takeover, waves of warriors displacing Celts in a 5th century blitz? Or something subtler, a cultural makeover, assimilation dressed as conquest, with Bede's 8th century pen spinning it into myth to cloak inconvenient truths? Let's play detective, sifting motives and evidence like clues at a crime scene, because if this invasion was more mirage than mayhem, it flips the script on who the English really are, leaving us with riddles that echo from ancient graves to modern DNA labs. Our investigation kicks off in the fertile fields of East Yorkshire, where the West Heslington site sprawls like a forgotten chapter in Britain's storybook. Dominic Powsland's team walked those grounds for years, their boots tracing 15 kilometres of what he calls the Ladder Settlement, a ribbon of farms and villages hugging wetlands, occupied from the Bronze Age straight through to the 8th century. No dramatic breaks, no scorched earth from invaders, just steady life, evolving quietly. Geophysics painted the picture: trackways flanked by enclosures, houses huddled like old friends. Dig deeper, and the Anglo-Saxon cemetery yields skeletons decked in continental styles, cruciform brooches, spears at hips, but isotope analysis by Paul Budd at Durham University drops the bomb. Most were locals, born right there, or from Western Britain, not boatloads from Saxony. 4 foreigners, all women, low status, perhaps brides or servants from Scandinavia, their graves sparse. This wasn't replacement, it was remix. Fashions crossing the North Sea like trends on social media today. But if not invasion, what? Enter the cultural chameleon theory, Britons adopting Germanic vibes for prestige or pragmatism, much like how genes conquered the world without an army. Sam Lucy's work on 5th century graves shows burial rites shifting. Women buried with brooches and beads echoing Frisian styles, men with shields and spears. No war cemeteries, no burned villas, just change, perhaps driven by trade or elite alliances. Heinrich Harker argues for migrations, citing barrows on ridges as dominance displays, but even he admits the evidence is slim, no North Sea trails of ships. Francis Pryor, in his digs, sees internal evolution, kings rising through savvy, not swords. Conspiracy creeps in. Was this Anglo-Saxon label a later invention, a rebrand to legitimize Norman rule after 1066? Think about it, William the Conqueror, a French-Norse hybrid, claiming descent from these pure tribes to whitewash his own invasion. Our suspect, Bede, steps into the interrogation room with his ecclesiastical history of the English people, penned around 731 in his Jarrow monastery. This isn't dry chronicle. It's a bestseller of its day, crafting the English as a chosen people, converted from pagan Angles by Augustine in 597. Bede paints Pope Gregory, spotting fair-haired slaves in Rome, quipping they're angels, not Angles, then dispatching missionaries to save them. But zoom in, and cracks appear. Bede's agenda shines, glorifying Roman Christianity, while sidelining Celtic strains already thriving in Wales and Ireland. Patrick and Columba's missions predated Augustine, with bishops like those at Withdrawal active since the 4th century. Bede downplays this, portraying Britain as heathen turf ripe for Roman salvation. Why? Perhaps to unify fractious kingdoms under a single English banner, his Northumbrian patrons loving the divine mandate vibe. Conspiracy theorists dub it the Bede cover-up his history as propaganda, erasing Celtic Quito to favour Roman orthodoxy. Link it to the Synod of Whitby in 664, where Roman Easter calculations trumped Celtic ones, Bede's side winning. Was this ecclesiastical power grab, with Bede as spin doctor, his sources, spotty, relying on oral tales and selective letters? Fringe voices tie it to Norman agendas. Bede's work popularized post-Conquest, perhaps edited to align Anglo-Saxons with new rulers, burying Brittonic roots. Modern parallels? Like how colonial histories marginalized indigenous narratives, Bede might have Saxon-washed Britain to justify dominance. DNA sleuthing adds twists. Mark Thomas's UCL study in 2006 suggested 50 to 100% replacement in Eastern England, but a 2023 revisit by his department flips it. No mass wipeout. Viking signals muddling the mix. Stable isotopes echo migrants trickle in, not torrent. At Sutton Hoo, that 7th century ship burial with its Swedish helm and Byzantine silver, Helen Geek sees local kings crafting origin myths, claiming godly descent without boatloads of royals. Heinrich Harker debates. Culture change without people? Unlikely. But Russia post. Soviet shows it. McDonald's everywhere. Sans American hordes. Bede's fingerprints? His English people unifies Angles, Saxons, Jutes tribes he lists, invading in 449 under Hengist and Horsa. But archaeology? No invasion scars. West Heslaton's continuity screams assimilation. Britain's donning Germanic garb like adopting hip-hop in the 90s. Language shift? Katie Lowe's linguistics spot Celtic grammar in English word order over endings. A bilingual blend over generations. Not conquest crush. The plot thickens with Celts versus Saxons conspiracies. Victorians amping Anglo-Saxon purity to justify empire, contrasting rational Teutons with irrational Celts. Bede's seed? His work fueled it, perhaps intentionally, to sideline Celtic churches. Irish annals tell different tales, Britons as Picts and Scots foes, not Saxon victims. As our case builds, questions mount. If Bede spun assimilation as invasion, who benefited? Norman kings, claiming Saxon heritage to rule. And what of those DNA echoes, small Scandinavian inputs, perhaps slaves or allies? What if they tie to the isotope migrants ahead? Those biostones from earlier Celtic whispers in Latin code, what if they hold the key to debunking Bede, unlocking the real English puzzle next? Ever wondered if your family tree hides a plot twist so wild it could upend entire nations' origin stories? Picture this: buried bones whispering secrets through their very chemistry, DNA strands unraveling like detective novels, and a conspiracy theory claiming it all points to a deliberate wipeout of ancient peoples. I've chased these genetic ghosts through labs and lore, and tonight, we're zeroing in on the population puzzles of Dark Age Britain. Using isotopes and DNA as our magnifying glass, we'll probe the Anglo-Saxon era's migration mysteries. Did hordes replace locals in a 5th century sweep? Or was it a subtler shift, with shadowy forces later erasing the evidence to craft a tidy tale of conquest? Let's dissect this like forensic experts on a midnight shift, because if the data's right, Britain's story might be more mosaic than massacre. We'll start our probe with the isotopes, those atomic fingerprints locked in teeth and bones, telling tales of where someone grew up without uttering a word. Think of them as nature's passports. Oxygen isotopes in enamel reflect the water you drank as a kid, pinpointing climates from rainy Britain to sunnier Scandinavia. At West Heslington, that Yorkshire time capsule we glimpsed before, Paul Budd's team at Durham University in the early 2000s analysed 24 skeletons from a 5th century cemetery. The verdict? Half the folks were local Yorkshire stock, the other half hailed from wetter western climes like Cumbria, hardly the Germanic flood historians once pictured. But the plot thickens with those 4 outsiders, all women, their drinking water signatures screaming Scandinavia, yet buried humbly, sans fancy brooches or beads. Were they captives in a wipeout raid, or willing migrants weaving into British fabric? Recent tweaks to isotope methods, like a 2024 study from UCL refining rainfall maps, sharpen these portraits, suggesting even subtler moves, perhaps seasonal herders or bride-sealing alliances. Fast forward to DNA's starring role, where ancient genomes act like time machines, sequencing the dead to map living legacies. Mark Thomas's 2006 UCL bombshell initially screamed 50 to 100% replacement in eastern England, fueling wipeout fears Celts shoved aside by Anglo-Saxon supermen. But hold the headlines. His team's 2023 revisit dials it back, blending signals with Viking inputs from the 8th century, muddying the migration math. No total eclipse, just a partial mix. Enter the blockbuster, a 2022 Nature paper on 460 Anglo-Saxon-era genomes from East Anglia, revealing continental northern European ancestry spiking post-Rome, but not uniformly up to 76% in some spots, yet blending with local Iron Age DNA. It's like a genetic cocktail, not a purge, with women showing more local roots, hinting at intermarriage rather than conquest. What if this blend masks a darker wipeout agenda? Conspiracy circles buzz with the Jefferson theory, not Thomas, but fringe echoes of Enlightenment skeptics like Voltaire, who questioned migration myths as elite fabrications. Modern spins claim early DNA studies were skewed to prop your English narratives, echoing Victorian race science that pitted Teutonic vigour against Celtic whimsy. A 2025 Guardian piece spotlights a Roman-era Brit with Scandinavian DNA, living between 100 and 300 AD, long before Anglo-Saxons supposedly sailed in. Was there an earlier wipeout, Germanic trickles priming the pump for later waves, or elite engineering, Romans importing mercenaries to erase rebellious Celts? Probe further with a January 2025 UCL breakthrough, a hyper-precise ancestry method dissecting first millennium migrations, spotting Germanic pulses southward in the Iron Age, then Anglo-Saxon echoes. It paints no mass extermination, just gradual influx, perhaps 20% genome shift overall. Yet, conspiracy hunters cry foul. Why the Eastern bias? A Saxon supremacy plot, they say, with chroniclers like Bede, our suspect from last time, amplifying invasions to justify church takeovers, erasing Celtic Christians as heathens. Link it to the BBC's January 2025 report on new bone tests, rewriting history. Strontium isotopes now track local verses. Migrant diets with laser accuracy, revealing kids raised on continental grains buried in British soil. No wipeout graves, but subtle shifts, perhaps erasure through marriage, not murder. The intrigue peaks with 2025's high-res genomic map in Nature, scanning medieval Europe to spotlight Britain's blend. Iron Age locals mingling with Anglo-Saxons, no sharp replacement cliff. A Smithsonian recap of hundreds of bones echoes this migration. Yes, but mosaic, not monochrome. Conspiracy twist. Were samples cherry-picked to downplay violence? A soft wipeout narrative suiting modern multiculturalism? Fringe forums buzz with elite erasure, DNA labs allegedly suppressing data showing higher replacement to avoid stirring nationalism. At Isles Tour's blog, Isotopes and DNA unravel the Anglo-Saxon mystery, showing women as cultural bridges, their local genes carrying Germanic styles. No Noah Saw mass graves like Boudicca's revolt, just fusion. Yet, the wipeout myth persists, perhaps Bede's handiwork, his English unity erasing Brittonic diversity. A collector article settles debates with genetics. Migration real, but not total eclipse. Science Daily's January piece unlocks migrations. Germanic moves predating Anglo-Saxons. As data dances, doubts linger. If isotopes tag locals in Saxon graves, was erasure cultural, not genetic? And what of those Western migrants, Celtic refugees, or something sinister? Those Scandinavian women in humble graves, what if their stories unlock the language enigmas ahead, where Celtic whispers haunt English words? Ever felt like words are alive, twisting and turning through time like vines in an ancient forest, hiding secrets in their roots? I've always been fascinated by how languages evolve not just as tools for chatter, but as living puzzles that carry the echoes of forgotten peoples and their clashes. In the shadowy corridors of Dark Age Britain, where Celtic tongues whispered among misty hills and Germanic dialects boomed from incoming ships, we find a fusion that's anything but straightforward. It's a mysterious blend, where English emerges not as a conqueror's trophy, but as a sneaky hybrid, Celtic structures lurking beneath Germanic gloss. What hidden forces drove this linguistic alchemy? Was it peaceful mingling, or a subtle erasure where one culture's voice drowned out another's, leaving clues in grammar and folklore that still baffle us today? Our hunt begins with the bones of English itself, a language that struts like a Germanic powerhouse but sneaks in Celtic whispers when you least expect it. Take the way we build sentences. In Old English, it was all about word endings dictating meaning, much like modern German, where der Hund beißt den Mann means the dog bites the man. But flip the endings, and it's the man biting back. Yet, as Katie Lowe's research digs into, English ditched that flexibility for rigid word order, the dog bites the man versus the man bites the dog. This shift? Straight out of Celtic playbooks, where position mattered more than suffixes. It's like English inherited a Germanic vocabulary, but wrapped it in Celtic grammar, a sneaky inheritance that linguists like Peter Shriver have spotlighted in recent works, arguing that contact, not conquest, wove these threads. Why the hush-hush? Perhaps because admitting Celtic roots muddies the pure Anglo-Saxon myth, a narrative that conveniently erases the locals in favor of invaders. Zoom into the cultural mashup, and the intrigue thickens. Folklore brims with this blend. Think of the Green Man, that leafy face peering from medieval churches, a Celtic fertility symbol grafted onto Christian stonework, or the Wild Hunt, where Germanic Odin's riders merge with Celtic fairy processions in tales that chill the spine. In the Dark Ages, as Germanic settlers trickled in, they didn't bulldoze Celtic ways, they absorbed them, like how hall houses in eastern England echo Celtic roundhouses but square up with Saxon long halls. A bioarchaeology study traces this in diets: Germanic grains mixing with Celtic herbs in burial feasts. Isotopes revealing shared tables rather than segregated ones. It's as if the land itself conspired to fuse them, birthing a hybrid vigor that powered Britain's rise. But let's chase the linguistic rabbit hole deeper. What if this blend hides a conspiracy of silence? Bede, our chronicler from before, barely nods to Celtic tongues, painting Britain as a pagan blank slate for Anglo-Saxon salvation. Yet, place names betray him. Rivers like Avon, from Celtic abona, meaning river, flow through Saxon lands, while hills whisper pen, Celtic for head, in Pennines. A Reddit thread from linguists debates this, noting how Celtic do support, as in, do you like it, sneaks into English, a quirk absent in other Germanics but alive in Welsh. Was Bede's omission deliberate? A church ploy to erase Celtic Christianity's Eastern-tinged monasticism in favour of Roman Orthodoxy? Cultural echoes amplify the mystery Celtic knotwork twines into Anglo-Saxon manuscripts like the Lindisfarne Gospels, where Germanic runes mingle with Irish illuminations, a visual code of fusion. In music, the harp's Celtic strings resonate in Saxon halls, ballads blending heroic epics. A De Gruyterbrille chapter explores this in Celtic Englishes, showing how idioms like kick the bucket might root in Celtic death rites, not pure Germanic stock. It's tantalizing did Germanic warriors adopt Celtic storytelling, their sagas softened by bardic flair. The erasure theory gains traction with recent genomics. A bio-preprint traces Celtic languages spread with Urnfield migrations. But in Britain, the blend suggests no wipeout, just linguistic layering. Conspiracy? Perhaps elites Germanicized to climb social ladders, leaving Celtic substrata in dialects like Cornish wheel, mine, influencing English mining terms. A ResearchGate paper argues for contact linguistics, where bilingualism birthed hybrids, not dominance. Folklore adds spice tales of fairy otherworlds in Celtic lore, morph into Germanic elf realms, a cultural cocktail that birthed Arthurian legends, where Celtic kings wield Germanic swords. A Facebook theory posits English's evolution as invasion borrowing, but Isotopes say otherwise peaceful fusion. Dead Language Society's blog revives Celtic roots in English, like whiskey from Wispetha. This enigmatic weave Celtic syntax in Germanic words hints at lost bilingual worlds, where cultures danced in the dark. But if fusion trumped erasure, what conspiracy hid it? Those hidden Celtic idioms, what if they code messages for the chosen people myth ahead, where Bede's pen redraws Britain's soul? The whiskey whisper, spirit of life, or a toast to erased voices, voices echoing in the bishop's conspiracy next. As we wrap up this winding journey through the enigmas of Dark Age Britain, I can't help but feel like we've been time travellers. We've chased shadows from Arthur's misty Camelot to the sunken treasures of Byzantine traders, questioning invasions that might have been illusions and rituals that whispered of gods long before churches rose. But now, let's pause and reflect not on the fragments we've uncovered, but on what they mean for us today. What if Britain's true identity isn't forged in the fires of conquest or the gloom of so-called dark times, but in a vibrant tapestry of borrowed threads, where every mystery from the past mirrors the diverse, ever-shifting mosaic of modern life? It's a thought that keeps me up at night, pondering how those ancient blends echo in our streets, our stories, and even our supper plates. Think about it this way. Britain's story isn't a straight arrow from Roman roads to Saxon shields, but a swirling eddy where cultures collide and create something unbreakable. We've seen how the Celts' water rites lingered in Christian springs, how Gnostic whispers hid in villa mosaics, and how trade winds from Byzantium carried not just wine, but whispers of empire that never fully faded. This wasn't a land stumbling in darkness after 410. It was a crucible, melting Roman discipline with Celtic spirit, Germanic grit with monastic insight. The isotopes and DNA we've probed don't scream replacement, they hum with harmony. Locals adopting new styles like we swap playlists today. That phantom time notion, wild as it is, reminds us how histories can be bent, perhaps to hide how resilient those early Brits really were, shrugging off empires while weaving their essence into the newcomer's fabric. And here's where the real magic sparks. This fusion birthed a national character that's all about adaptation, the ultimate survival hack. Take chicken tikka masala, that curry house staple often crowned Britain's national dish. Born from Indian spices meeting Glasgow's rainy cravings in the 1970s, it's a perfect metaphor, bold flavours from afar, tempered with cream for local palates, creating something uniquely British. Just like how Celtic grammar sneaks into English sentences, or how those Bayer stones hid verses that bridged pagan and Christian worlds. It's diversity as strength, not dilution. Robin Cook, the former Foreign Secretary, nailed it back in 2001. Britain's greatness stems from this mix, ethnic groups layering their contributions into a resilient whole. But what if there's a twist? Some conspiracy minds whisper that such narratives are modern spins, erasing older divides to suit global agendas. Think how Victorian scholars hyped Anglo-Saxon purity to justify empire, only for 21st century science to reveal the blend was always there. Ponder the everyday echoes. Our festivals mash Celtic Samhain with Germanic Yule into Halloween and Christmas, bonfires crackling with ancient fire rites, or how place names like London, from Celtic Londino's wild place, rub shoulders with Saxon witch settlement in Norwich. This isn't accident, it's alchemy, cultures alchemizing under pressure. A 2025 linguistic map from Cambridge traces how Welsh pen, hill, influences Pennine dialects, while Germanic ham, home, dots the landscape's silent testaments to lives intertwined, not overwritten. The intrigue? If Bede's English people was a construct to unify under Roman Christianity, sidelining Celtic voices, then our modern multiculturalism might be reclaiming that lost chorus, a quiet rebellion against erasure. In an age of DNA kits revealing Viking or Celtic surprises in our veins, are we rediscovering what was always there, or stirring ghosts that challenge national myths? Britain's identity thrives on this tension, from the multicultural buzz of London's markets, echoing those Bantham beach feasts, to the quiet resilience of Welsh valleys preserving ancient tongues. It's not purity that powers us, it's the mix, the mysterious brew that turned a post-Roman island into a global player. As we drift towards sleep, consider how your own story might mirror this, threads from afar weaving into who you are, secrets waiting to unfold. And now, dear listeners, as the stars twinkle over these ancient isles, it's time to let the whispers of history lull you into dreams. I'm Mr. H, thanking you for joining me on Mystery History for Sleep, where the past's enigmas weave the perfect bedtime tale. Picture those Celtic springs, their waters soothing your thoughts, or the soft rustle of Saxon halls fading into the night. Whether you're drifting off to visions of Arthur's knights or pondering the DNA in your own story, let these mysteries wrap you in calm. Sleep deep, dream vivid, and we'll meet again under the moonlight of history. Good night and sweet dreams.